I never thought I'd end up working nights at a place like this. After losing my job at the warehouse, I was desperate. Bills were piling up, and the eviction notice was a constant reminder that time was running out. So when I saw the listing for a night security position at the old theme park, I didn't hesitate. The park had been closed for over a decade. They said it was due to safety violations and declining attendance, but locals whispered about accidents and disappearances. I didn't pay much attention to the rumors. I needed the job. On my first night, I arrived just before midnight. The entrance was chained, but I had a key. As I drove in, my headlights illuminated rusted rides and overgrown paths. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. The security trailer was located near the center of the park. It was a small, windowless structure with peeling paint and a flickering overhead light. Inside, there was a desk, a chair, a portable radio, and a stack of logbooks. A single bulb cast a dim glow, barely illuminating the room. I settled in, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my stomach. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of metal from the rides and the distant hoot of an owl. Around 1 a.m., I heard a faint melody. It was the carousel. The music was slow and distorted, like a record playing at the wrong speed. I checked the control panel. Everything was off. I stepped outside and the music stopped. The carousel stood still, its chipped horses frozen in place. I returned to the trailer, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But as I sat down, I noticed a folded piece of paper on the desk. I hadn't seen it before. I unfolded it, expecting a maintenance report or a note from the previous guard. Instead, it was a list of rules, not typed or printed, but handwritten in shaky script. The first line read, "Do not approach the carousel if it plays after midnight." I felt a chill run down my spine. I hadn't told anyone about the music. How did this note know? I spent the rest of the night on edge, jumping at every sound. When dawn finally broke, I left the park, vowing to find another job. But the next night, I was back. I needed the money. And so began my nights at the abandoned theme park, where the rides moved on their own and the rules were written by unseen hands. I kept the envelope. Not the smartest move, I know. Most people would have burned it, or at least thrown it out. But something about it felt like a thread, not just a warning, a kind of proof that I hadn't imagined the click from the carousel, that someone had been here before me. Maybe someone still was. The rules stayed in my back pocket for the rest of that night. I didn't finish my second loop. I walked halfway toward the Ferris wheel, turned around and came back. The longer I stayed outside, the more I felt like I was trespassing on something that hadn't expected company in a long time, something that had gotten comfortable in its silence. Inside the trailer, I sat at the desk and started writing in the log again, just the basic stuff. Time of patrol, weather, observations. I didn't mention the envelope. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to see it in ink. Maybe I thought if I wrote it down, it'd become more real. But the truth was already real. Too real. The next night started quiet, colder somehow. I pulled my hood tighter and brought the flashlight closer to my chest as I stepped outside. The gravel crunched louder than usual, like the night had emptied out every other sound just so I'd notice my own. I did my loop. The carousel stayed silent. No clicks. Just those broken horses, still caught in their frozen gallop. It was when I got to the old arcade that things started shifting again. I'd been avoiding it, mostly because it smelled like wet carpet and mildew, and the floorboards inside had a kind of give that made every step feel like it might cave through. But that night, the door was already open. Just slightly, just enough to see the darkness inside, waiting. I told myself the wind must have done it. Even though there hadn't been a breeze all evening, I stepped inside. Just one step. Then I saw it. The machine near the back, flickering, faint blue light flashing like a heartbeat. It was one of those old cabinet games, Galaxy Patrol. I remembered it from when I was a kid. Simple graphics, bright stars, little pixel ships flying in endless loops. But this one didn't have any sound, no intro screen, just flashes of static across a frozen menu, like it had powered on but didn't know what to do next. I turned my head slightly to read the screen, and that's when I saw it. In the reflection, not me, something behind me, or maybe the shape of me, standing further back than I should have been. I spun around, nothing there, just the air heavy and still, just the cracked floor and the water stains up the walls. But when I turned back, the machine was off, dead, no light, like it had never been on. I stepped out without looking back and walked the long way around to the trailer. I didn't want to cut past the carousel again. Inside, the heater had shut off. I didn't remember turning it off. It buzzed back to life the moment I touched the switch. And sitting in the chair across from the table, one I hadn't used, one I hadn't even moved since I got there, was another envelope. Not sealed, just folded. This time I didn't even hesitate. I opened it and read it without sitting down. I didn't say the rule out loud. I didn't have to. It burned itself into my head like it belonged there. If Galaxy Patrol flickers after 1 a.m, don't touch it. Don't read the screen. Leave immediately. I folded the note and put it in the drawer with the first. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay on the cot and listened to the trailer creak like it was breathing. In, out. Always in rhythm with my own pulse. The next night I almost didn't go out. I sat at the table, fully dressed, flashlight in hand, staring at the clock on the wall as it rolled toward midnight. I wasn't scared of the dark anymore. I was scared of what knew how to use it. Eventually, I stood up and started my walk. The park looked the same. Same rusting railings, same warped ticket booth windows, same paint flaking off cartoon animals that had once smiled, but it all felt closer, not physically, just tighter. Like the whole place was slowly exhaling and pulling me in with it. When I reached the flume ride, I froze. There was water, not much, just a thin trickle running down the concrete trough. Impossible. There hadn't been water in that ride in over a decade. I stepped closer, listened. No machinery, no pumps. Just the soft, steady sound of water moving against stone. And the smell, like algae that had been sleeping too long. I turned away. Didn't even write it down. I just walked, back toward the trailer. And when I got inside, the drawer with the rules was open. Not all the way, just cracked. Like someone had reached in, found what they needed, and left it half done. I closed it. Didn't check inside. I already knew what I'd find. A new note, a new line, a new warning. But I couldn't bring myself to read it yet, because I already knew what it would say. I'd broken a rule. I'd stayed too long by the flume, and whatever was listening now had my scent. That night I dreamed, not the regular kind, the kind that feels more like memory than fiction. I was walking through the park. Daylight, birds, wind, except every ride was running, full speed. No people, just movement. The carousel spun. The arcade machines blinked. The log flume roared with water. But I was the only one there. And in the dream, I was smiling, walking like I belonged, like I had always been there. When I woke up, I wasn't in the cot. I was sitting in the chair across from the table. The envelope drawer was open. The paper was already in my hand, but I hadn't read it yet, and my fingers were shaking. I read it without breathing. It didn't even feel like new information, just something I'd been avoiding saying out loud. If you hear water in the flume, leave the area immediately. Do not approach. Do not wait for it to stop. I set the paper down and looked around the room. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. Because now I understood. The park wasn't waiting for me to break the rules. It was learning how far I'd go before I stopped following them. And that was the scariest part, because I wasn't sure I had the strength to resist the next one. Not if it came wrapped in something that sounded like my own voice. Not if it said something I already believed, like, "You're already part of this place, you just haven't figured out how yet." By the time the third week started, I'd stopped pretending this was a normal job. I still wrote in the log, still made the rounds, but it was muscle memory now. Like I was playing the part of a night guard instead of actually being one. Deep down, I knew that whatever was happening here had its own rhythm, its own motives. I wasn't here to protect the park, I was here to be studied by it. I woke up one evening with the strange sense that I'd already started the night. I couldn't remember falling asleep, couldn't remember turning the heater off. But the air inside the trailer was warm, warmer than it should have been. My boots were already laced. My jacket was hanging by the door like someone had taken it off and set it there for me. I stood up slowly and looked around. The logbook was open. A new page had been started. Same handwriting as mine, same shorthand I always used. But I hadn't written it. The entry read, "First patrol complete, all gates secured, Ferris wheel still leaning, nothing out of place." It was the exact thing I would have written, down to the wording. The time in the corner was marked as 12:24, but the wall clock said 11:42. I put my hand on the logbook like I could feel the truth through the paper. It was still warm. I stepped outside. The air smelled like cold grease and wet stone. I started walking, not to patrol the park this time, but to see if anything was missing, if anything had been moved. Because if I didn't write that entry, something else did. I passed the food court. One of the hanging signs had come loose and was spinning slowly in the breeze. I passed the bumper cars, where the gate was hanging open again, same as the last 2 nights. I always locked it, always double-checked, but here it was again. The only thing that hadn't changed was the silence, the kind that thickens the longer you notice it, like the park was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do with the unease. When I reached the arcade, I stopped just outside the door. The machine that used to flicker Galaxy Patrol was off. The screen was black. The casing looked older, more warped than I remembered, like it had been sitting out in the rain for years. But I heard something from inside, a low static buzz. Not from the machine, from the far wall. I stepped inside and swept the flashlight across the room. Then I saw it, a portable radio, just like mine, sitting on the counter beneath the broken prize shelf. The static was coming from it. The screen was lit up, same model as mine, same sticker on the back, but I never left a radio in here. I didn't bring one out. And yet here it was. I stepped forward and picked it up. It was warm, and when I flipped it over, there was a name scratched into the casing. My name. Same handwriting I'd used on the logbook when I first arrived. I turned it off and set it down gently. I didn't bring it back with me. I just walked straight back to the trailer without looking behind me once. Inside, everything was exactly how I left it. Except the heater had turned on again. The logbook was closed, and a note was sitting on top of it. Not folded this time, just a piece of lined paper, torn at the edge, resting face up. I didn't need to read it to know what it was. I read it anyway. If you find a second version of something you own, leave it where it is. Do not compare, do not bring it back inside. I sat down and stared at the wall for almost an hour. No radio clicks, no carousel music, just the slow realization that the park wasn't just mimicking my actions, it was mimicking me. I started to notice the differences after that, the way the chair creaked when I sat in it, slightly off from before, the way my flashlight flickered now when I passed by the photo booth near the old souvenir stand, the smell in the trailer, stronger, like warm plastic, and old clothes that didn't belong to me. One night, I found my own handwriting in the dirt outside. Just one word. Logged. Dragged across the gravel with a stick or a finger. Same slant, same pressure. But I hadn't written it. That was the night I stopped using the logbook. Not because I didn't care about keeping records, but because I didn't want to give it anything else to copy. The next day, the envelope was under my pillow. I never sleep under the covers. I leave the cot made, always, even if I lie on top of it in full gear. So for it to be under the pillow, it had to be placed there by something that understood routine, that understood me. I didn't open it right away. I carried it with me that night like a charm. I passed the Ferris wheel, still leaning, past the gate, still locked, past the flume. Dry this time, but the smell was there again. Algae, copper, like something had just left the water, even if there wasn't any left. I returned to the trailer just after 3. I sat at the table, turned on the desk lamp, and unfolded the note. There were no instructions, just a single sentence. You are starting to forget what's yours. I stayed up the rest of the night making a list, in my own handwriting, out loud, the name of every item I brought here, what brand it was, what condition, where it had come from, my boots, my flashlight, my coat, every object I had touched, because if the park was trying to replace me, it had to start with the things I used. The next night, I heard something in the mirror. Not saw, heard. There's only one mirror in the trailer, small, mounted above the sink, cracked along the top edge. I never used it much, but when I leaned over to rinse my face, I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Softer. Slower. Right behind me. But when I looked, nothing. Just my own tired reflection. Eyes darker than I remembered, skin a shade too pale, and when I blinked, the reflection didn't, just stared, still, like it was waiting for me to stop pretending, like it was wondering when I'd accept it had always been the real one. I walked away and covered the mirror with the towel. Haven't looked in it since. I started keeping the radio on constantly after that, not to listen, to anchor myself. The static, as irritating as it is, became a kind of lifeline, something that hadn't changed, something that didn't breathe when I wasn't looking. But even that started to falter. One night, I woke to the radio playing something else, not static, not voices, laughter, soft, unnatural, like someone trying to remember how it's supposed to sound. It cut off the moment I reached for it, back to static, but I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The park was no longer reacting to my presence. It was rehearsing me. And one day, I knew it would be ready. The night I saw the footage was when I understood what that meant. I'd found a new memory card on the desk, not in a case, just sitting there next to the old thermos. I hadn't retrieved it. I hadn't gone near the cams in days. I plugged it into the laptop, 3 files, no labels. I opened the first. It was footage of the trailer, interior shot, desk, heater, cot. Same room I was sitting in. And in the footage I was already there, writing, smiling, rocking slightly in the chair, then looking straight into the lens, as if he'd been waiting for me to watch. I closed the laptop, didn't check the other files, didn't write anything down. I just sat there, wondering if I'd already been replaced, or if I was still the one doing the watching. And in that moment, I heard the knock again, soft, deliberate, right behind my ear. But there's no wall there, only open space. I didn't turn around, because I finally understood. It was never knocking to be let in. It was knocking to let me know. It was already inside. I don't remember falling asleep after the knock, but I must have. Because when I woke up, it was already dark again. The kind of dark that feels dense, heavy, like the night had weight to it. I sat up too fast and felt the air press in on my chest like I'd been underwater. The logbook was open again, a new entry, neater than mine, same words I would have used, but it wasn't mine. And that's when I realized I couldn't remember writing anything for the past 3 nights. Not clearly, not what I did, not what I saw, just fragments, smells, sounds, like the memory had been shaken loose from its casing. I didn't panic, not yet. Instead, I stood and walked to the door already knowing what I'd see. The trees, closer again. The nearest one was maybe 15 feet from the trailer now. It hadn't been like that when I arrived. I used to have to walk a full minute to reach the tree line, but now it was right there, its trunk wide, bark flaking in chunks like something had scraped it raw from the inside out. I turned away and started walking. Not a patrol, just movement. Anything to feel normal. I passed the food court. The lights above the vendor stalls were flickering, but there was no power. I watched them blink on and off in no pattern I could follow, each one slightly out of sync with the others, like they were stuttering. Then they all turned off at once. I didn't stop walking. I passed the kiddie coaster. The dragon car was missing, just gone. Nothing but the rusted tracks leading to an empty section of rail. I don't know why that hit me harder than anything else. Maybe because it was so simple, so final, not broken, not moved, just removed. When I got back to the trailer, the heater was running again. But it wasn't blowing air, it was breathing. Slow, rhythmic. I stood in the doorway staring at it, listening. Inhale, pause, exhale, like lungs. I walked over and unplugged it. The sound continued. I opened the cabinet under the sink looking for tools. I hadn't touched it since my first night. There was a folder inside, thin, damp at the corners, tied with string. I pulled it out and laid it flat on the table. Inside were photos, black and white, grainy, the trailer, the park, different seasons, different angles. In each photo there was a figure, sometimes near the flume, sometimes at the carousel, always facing the camera, always blurred, always just barely out of frame enough that I couldn't be sure. But I knew it was me, or something that had learned how to look like me. The last photo was different, a close-up, the desk, the logbook, a coffee mug I hadn't seen in weeks, and the date written in the corner, tomorrow. That's when the radio clicked on by itself. A new voice came through, soft, calm, clear, mine. It said, "Check the flume." Then silence, not static, not breathing, just silence. I sat there a long time, staring at the radio like it might explain itself. Then I grabbed the flashlight and went outside. The air was cold enough to sting my eyes. I followed the gravel trail to the basin. The trees on either side were leaning in again, their limbs stretched wide, like arms welcoming me back. I reached the bottom and shined the light ahead. There, sitting on the edge of the empty flume channel, was a tape recorder, same model as the one I kept in the trailer, same scuff mark on the side, same red indicator light blinking. I didn't pick it up, just crouched beside it. It was already recording. I pressed stop, then rewind, then play, and my voice came through, softer than usual. "Don't let it wear you. It only learns what you give it. But once it knows your patterns, it won't ask. It will just become." I paused the tape, rewound it again, but the words changed. This time I said, "You walked the same path again," it noticed. "Try something different." I played it again. Different words, new sentences, same voice. It was me, recording advice from a version of myself I didn't remember being. I took the recorder and walked back to the trailer. Inside, the heater had stopped breathing. The light above the desk had turned blue, not flickering, just blue. I'd never seen that bulb before. I didn't have time to react before the knock came again, but this time it wasn't from the wall. It was from under the floorboards. A single slow knock, from directly below my feet, then again, and again, 4 total. Then silence. I didn't move, not for minutes. When I finally sat down, I noticed something new on the table. A cup of coffee, still steaming, same mug from the photo. I picked it up slowly and felt the warmth in my palm. I didn't drink it, I just held it. And while I sat there, something inside me settled, not in comfort, in resignation. Because the park had stopped trying to scare me. It didn't need to anymore. It had already found its rhythm, and now it was making space for me to match it. The next morning, I saw my reflection in the window, and it didn't blink when I did. I didn't tell myself I was imagining things, not this time, because I saw its shoulders rise before mine, like it was guessing what I'd do next, and it guessed right. I stepped back from the window and pulled the curtains shut, and for the first time in weeks, I spoke out loud. You win. But the moment the words left my mouth, the tape recorder clicked on by itself, and my voice, from some other time, whispered, "Not yet." After that night, I stopped pretending the trailer was a safe place. I kept sleeping inside it, but it wasn't because I thought it offered protection. It was habit, muscle memory, like a dog curling up on a porch because it used to smell like its owner. The trailer wasn't mine anymore, if it ever was. The windows stayed shut, the curtains stayed drawn. I taped over them with the log pages I'd stopped writing. I unplugged the radio, then hid it in a cabinet beneath the sink. It still clicked sometimes, even without power, just a soft, static pulse, like it was breathing on the other side of the door. I stopped recording things, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't trust that I was the one pressing the button anymore. The notebook on the table kept filling itself. I'd find new lines added each time I turned away, half-finished sentences in my handwriting, rules I'd never written, questions I'd never asked. I tried burning one of the pages in the stove. The fire went out. I tried again with another page. The match wouldn't light. That's when I stopped trying to fight the park directly. It wasn't responding to force. It didn't need to. It only needed time, and I had given it plenty. I don't remember when the carousel started spinning again. Not clearly. I just know I heard it. One night, through the thin walls, through the layers of fog, the music crept back in, slower than I remembered, off-key, like the notes were being played backwards. I stayed inside. The next morning, I found my old security badge on the ground outside the trailer. The plastic had yellowed, the corner was chipped, but the photo, my face, was clean, sharper than before. The name printed under it wasn't mine, not exactly. It was close, just a few letters off, but the smile in the picture looked too wide, like it had learned how to stretch my mouth just far enough to look convincing. I picked it up and set it on the table. I didn't tear it up, I didn't burn it, I just let it sit. That day, I tried to do something I hadn't done since my first week. I tried to walk out, not far, just toward the front gate, the one chained shut when I arrived. I took the gravel path between the old rides, past the broken teacups, past the dunk tank and the half-collapsed photo booth. The sky overhead was grey, not storm grey, paper grey, like a sky waiting to be painted, but no one had finished the job. When I got to the main entrance, the gate was gone. Not open, gone. The posts were still there, the rusted hinges, the dent in the chain link where someone had once tried to climb over, but the gate itself had vanished. I stood in the opening, expecting something beyond it. A road, a clearing, anything. But it was just trees, rows and rows of trees, pine, birch, thick brush I didn't recognize. The path beyond the entrance wasn't a path anymore. It was forest, deep and still. And in the first row of trees, I saw something moving, not walking, not running, just swaying, like it was breathing in time with the carousel music. I turned around, walked back to the trailer. The radio was sitting on the desk again, plugged in, turned on. It hissed once, then clicked. My voice came through. It said, "Check the log. You've reached the end." I picked up the notebook. The pages were full. No spaces, no margins, just line after line in my handwriting. Most of them were rules. Don't ask about the cotton candy stand. Don't whistle after midnight. Don't wear your original boots after your 4th week. They didn't make sense, but they were written in different tones. Some sounded like me, some didn't. One line stood out near the bottom. It said, "You're not being replaced." Underneath that, "You're being remembered." The heater turned on. The stove flicked to life even though I hadn't touched it in days. And outside, the fog rolled in heavy, like a wall, like the park was pulling the sky down to its level. I stayed in the trailer for hours, listening. At one point, I heard something familiar. Footsteps, but not outside. Inside, in the back room. I didn't go check, I just waited. The door to the back room creaked open, then shut again. No wind. I didn't move. Eventually, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was back in the chair, same as always. The notebook was gone, so was the radio. The heater was still humming. The fire was still lit. It was like nothing had happened, like I'd imagined the whole thing. But I knew better, because when I opened the door, the sun was up, and someone was walking up the path toward the trailer. They were holding a bag, looking around like they didn't know where they were, same way I must have looked the day I arrived. I didn't wave, I didn't call out, I just stepped aside, let the door stay open, let them come in and find the envelope on the table. Same envelope I found, same message, different name. That night, I heard their footsteps echo across the gravel. One loop, then two. Then they came back, and I listened to them write in the logbook. Same pen, same table. Their words were shakier than mine had been, but familiar. I watched the fog settle around the trailer like a shroud, and when the knock came, the soft knock on the back wall near the window, I waited to see if they'd look. They didn't. Not the first night, but they would. Eventually, they all do. Because the park doesn't demand attention. It waits for it. It learns. It watches. And now, so do I. I still remember who I was. I still remember Illinois. The job I lost. The couch I slept on. The hollow feeling of starting over. But it doesn't feel real anymore. It feels like someone else's story that I borrowed. A prologue that's already faded. Now I sit in the trailer during the day and listen to the silence outside. I wait for the new guard to start seeing things, hearing things, questioning what time it is. I wait for them to check the flume. I wait for them to find the old badge. I wait for them to hear their voice on the radio, because that's the rule the park never told me, the one I had to learn myself. You don't leave this place, you become part of it. And once it knows your name, it doesn't let you go. Not because it needs you, but because it remembers you. Even after you've forgotten who you were. Even after the tape has stopped spinning. Even after the next voice starts whispering through the static. The park always remembers. And now, I do too.